Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Running Out the Clock. I'm your friend Joseph Craven, joined by Chandler Rowland, Keith Harkins, not joined by Roe Hunter today.
R.I.P. Roe.
And the ghost of Roe Hunter.
R.I.P. The ghost. He still haunts our memories to this day. We are in the final, but we're like less than 2 weeks away from the start of the college football season. We're in our final episode of our SEC preview series. Today we got to be talking about the Noles.
Talking about the Noles.
This is Running Out the Clock, the only official SEC podcast to be talking about the Noles.
Always.
AKA also the worst SEC podcast, AKA the only SEC podcast made by people that hate the SEC.
Sure.
Man, this whole podcast was a bad idea. We're talking about the Georgia.
I'd love to talk about how much I hate the SEC on one of these episodes, but
oh man, that would be great.
We're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. We're talking about the Auburn Tigers, and we're talking about the Noles, and we're talking about our picks for the overall end of the year standings in the divisions and who we think are going to be the champions when all is said and done. So let's not waste any more time, gentlemen. This year, Florida State, of course, has a new coaching staff after Jimbo Fisher leaves, but they returned some of their key players. Chandler, what you think about the Noles?
I think the Noles are going to be the Noles, and that's always a great thing for Nole fans and Nole Nation. And so
Noles going to know. Am I right?
Noles going to know.
Noles going to know.
They're going to put a lot of passion. They're going to execute. Their core values are going to be in place. And I really think that the Noles are going to be they're going to be back on top.
It just makes sense. Keith, your thoughts?
You know, Joseph, they're gonna play fast and loose on the offensive side of the ball. They're gonna play fundamentally strong defense with that swarm mentality.
Right.
But they're not going to be super great, and they're probably going to win 6 games this year.
Wow.
Well, all I know,
but they're going to look good doing it.
Yeah, all I know is I heard from their strength and conditioning coach, and everybody's bigger, faster, stronger. Their players are all in great shape, and yeah, I mean they're just tired of hitting each other in practice, ready to go up against some other colored uniforms, and really ready to execute and get it done.
Keith talking trash about the Noles.
You're going to play with a lot of heart. A lot of heart.
Well, anyway, that's talking about the Noles on Running Out the Clock. Now we're going to move on to the Georgia Bulldogs, the SEC champions from last season, runner-ups in the national race. An unexpected performance last year out of the Georgia Bulldogs. They were predicted to be good. A lot of people were thinking they'd, be good, probably win the East, all that sort of thing. Not a lot of people were expecting them to be a number one team in the country, battling for a national title, making it to the playoff, all of that, especially after Jacob Eason, the starter for the season, goes down very early on and is out. Jake Fromm, star of QB1 on Netflix, shows up to lead them for the rest of the year, does a pretty solid job. Of course, he had 2 of the most dynamic running backs in college football on his side, which helps, and some phenomenal defenders to go along with that. Things a little bit different this year. I mean, Eason has officially gone back home to Washington. He's from Lake Stevens, Washington, which, if I remember correctly, is just like a half hour away from where my wife grew up, something like that. But anyway, home of Chris Pratt.
Congrats on being married, bro.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Also, congrats to Chris Pratt.
Yeah, more importantly than anything else, just congrats to Chris Pratt. That man's doing great in life, and I'm really happy for him. So it stands to reason at this point that, well, Jake Fromm is the guy. He is the man leading into this time, or is he? Because there is a 5-star dual threat recruit coming in. That was a little bit bigger recruit coming out of high school than Fromm was, so people are wondering about that. But what do we think about, first and foremost, the Georgia quarterbacking situation now that they've got another guy who is coming into the season as the established starter? We know that can change in a heartbeat. But what do we think about Jake Fromm as a signal caller? I don't know if you guys have strong opinions about Fromm or not, but I want to hear them. Chandler, what do you think?
Well, I think I think that Jake from State Farm is a good quarterback. I hate to call quarterbacks this, but really all he had to do last year was come in and just manage the game, get the ball to Chubb and Michelle, and kind of let them do their thing. And then when you need to make a play, make a play. And he did. He did a great job of that. And so that's why I hate calling somebody a game manager, because it implies that they're somehow not a good quarterback in and of themselves. And he really is. I mean, he fit the offense well. I mean, just everything that you asked him to do was just so perfect for their offense. And hey, talk about baptism by fire. His first game as a starter is at Notre Dame.
Right.
Notre Dame's still not great team, but that's still not a game that you want to be like, hey, congratulations, rookie, here's your first start, go. And he was able to rely on the defense and the running game, and they got it done. And I think the only question that I really have there is, does Justin Fields, maybe as a quarterback himself, does he give them more of that big play potential from the quarterback himself, instead of, hey, you just kind of come in and manage the game and just don't make mistakes and let the rest of your team win? That's the only real question I have about it. And without knowing more, I don't know a ton about what Georgia has behind Michelle and Chubb. So that's what I'm looking for to see is, does Justin Fields kind of present enough of that big play kind of game breaking opportunity in and of himself versus Fromm's ability to just kind of do the right thing and make the right play. Kind of what do they end up needing on offense? That's what I want to know.
Sure. I mean, in Fromm, you've got, a prototypical, kind of a prototypical Georgia quarterback that we've had in recent memory. I think about Aaron Murray a lot as well when I think about Jake Fromm, and that, about 6'2", 220 pounds or something like that. A pretty much a pocket passer, and a pretty, when he's comfortable, I mean, he's going to make the right throws. He did throw as a true freshman for 2,600 yards, 62% completion percentage, 24 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Not bad numbers at all for a freshman. But again, he was in the situation in which he didn't have to force anything. Exactly what you're saying, Chandler. He didn't really have to, step up and do anything out of the ordinary. And maybe that is what Fields can do. He could be more of a playmaker type of player, and maybe that's what they want to switch to. But as far as what they do have returning, in particular, they come back with some pretty experienced wide receivers, I believe. One of the more experienced cores as a whole in the conference. They lost Javon Wims, I believe, when graduated or went pro. But beyond that, they bring back most of the guys they had. Now, granted, it was a wide receiver core that didn't necessarily spread the ball out very deep. They really have 3 players in particular that stand out as having a handful of catches, double-digit catches. Beyond that, Michelle, Chubb are gone. Keith, they bring back a player, DeAndre Swift, who did run for 600 yards last season.
And what a great running back name, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, you want to, what type of running back is he? Oh, he's a power back.
Pretty much hit the lottery with that one.
Anyway, but they bring back DeAndre Swift, 600 yards as a freshman, got several years left with this guy. What is it going to take, though, for that offense that, as of right now, they've got they've got, like I mentioned, several experienced receivers coming back, if not generally tested. And they've got what seems to be a promising running back. But what's it going to take to replace what Michelle and Chubb were able to do?
Well, getting 600 yards in the same backfield as a healthy Nick Chubb and Sonny Michelle is pretty impressive, to be perfectly honest. So I think they're in capable hands with who they have back there. I don't think they lost anything on the offensive line, so they look to be good there. they've stayed remarkably consistent on offense as far as their turnover, outside of obviously all-star running backs like Chubb and Michelle. But I think he just does what he did last year. He's going to get a lot more carries, and so stands to reason that he should pick up right where he left off.
Do you think that they have enough tools there to have a productive offense, all things considered?
Overall, yeah. I think so. I think that they're going to have to find some more depth at the wide receiver position to be able to make a lot of noise there. And of course, Jake Fromm's going to have to continue developing. I'm always really leery of true freshman quarterbacks coming in and being counted on to be playmakers and to completely lead an offense. If Fromm gets hurt or completely implodes, then you have no choice there. But to say that he beats out Fromm in a quarterback battle and then starts the rest of the way going forward, I would be a lot less confident in that offense if they decide to go that way, personally.
I mean, it would be a very strange, thank you to Jake Fromm for surviving last season.
Yeah.
Go ahead and Benjamin completely change everything up. This might be a situation where, having just lost their two most productive playmakers on the offensive side of things, and that they need to just establish, stability first and foremost, in putting as much confidence as they can in Fromm to make the plays in his offensive line, to hold and to give him enough time to be productive. That's what it stands to reason. Maybe that be what their focus is first and foremost.
Well, and I think you have to remember the new redshirt rule that plays into this, because you can play Justin Fields as much as you want in 4 games this year, and whether that's making sure, kind of like they did, if you remember several years ago when DJ Shockley took over for David Green, they kind of always made sure that Shockley got one or two drives with the ones when the game was still on the line, and that served him well. He came in, he was ready to play, and so you can kind of come in and you can really groom Fields to play this year. You can give him meaningful snaps and not really have to worry about his future eligibility. And then I think just with him, it's kind of a Tim Tebow, Chris Leak situation, because Fields is so he's going to see the field. He has to see the field because he's just that good, I think. And you can kind of put him in where some goal line runs, some design plays every so often, some opportunities to kind of really get him in the rhythm of a game without kind of saying to Fromm, hey, you're not our guy. You're not the guy that we think, we believe in you, but here's some different things he can do, and we're going to make that happen. So I think they're going to, Fromm's their guy. I don't think there's any real question there, but I think they're going to use Fields in a way that really kind of gets you excited about the future if you're into Georgia doing well.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good comparison with the Chris Leak and Tim Tebow situation in Florida. A lot of fans saw Tim Tebow as the quarterback of the future. Obviously, that was Chris Leak's senior year. It's a little bit of a different situation out of Athens, but I think that you can kind of bring him along slowly, get him some reps, put him into specific packages. It's worked well for teams in the past, kind of with that sort of dichotomy, I guess. Fields is being compared to Clemson's Deshaun Watson. That's pretty high praise. So if you got a guy that reminds you a lot of a player like that, then I wouldn't blame you for trying to get him early reps.
Yeah, it makes sense with the whole redshirt rule to go ahead and try it out, especially considering that they have the ability. I had Georgia's schedule pulled up in front of me a second ago, and I seem to have misplaced it. I was going to see exactly who all they open up with to determine whether or not.
Their first 4 games are Austin P, at South Carolina, Middle Tennessee State, and at Missouri.
Yeah, so I mean, you've got Austin P, Middle Tennessee State in particular, where you can safely assume that they do what they're supposed to do. They've got time to put him in there and let him run things for a little bit and see exactly what the offense could, stack up like for him. So why not? Why not give him a shot? I don't think he's going to be able to do enough. I think Kirby Smart, I don't think strikes me as too much of a risk taker in trying to go ahead and shake things up too much like that. Who knows? He could be wrong. And I mean, you never know what might happen. It could be that Fromm comes out and just blows it for a couple of games and Fields looks just that much more composed. Who knows? We'll find out.
And injuries are always a possibility too. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
That's why we're having this conversation right now, is because of an injury last year.
Sure. I mean, that's not why I brought it up as like if he could beat him out in the race, which is what some people are trying to make a storyline. So yeah, injuries are one thing. I was specifically speaking right then about just like production wise getting better. So also as a quick side note that's not related to anything, if you go to Atlanta Falcons rookie wide receiver Calvin Ridley's Wikipedia page right now, it says that he's a 7'1", 190-pound guy who was picked number 1 overall and died in 1910.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
That's
I don't know what I don't know if you have a beef with that or not, but that seems pretty accurate to me.
I mean, you asked me to describe Calvin Ridley. That's exactly how I'm describing him.
No, I think that's accurate.
Years
I don't
from
think
now,
of anything else. Yeah.
When my children ask, that's what I'm going to bring up.
That's as accurate as a Jake Fromm touchdown pass.
Yep. Ho. All right. Keith, going to go back to you real quick because I know you've got some opinions here on this issue, but one of the biggest storylines leading into Georgia's season happens on the defensive side of things. In particular, that's where they probably see the most overall loss. Obviously, Chubb and Michelle leaving are huge losses. But on the defense side of things, they see a lot more loss across other, multiple positions. In particular, they do lose one of the greatest linebackers that, they've had. But they also lose all of their starting linebackers. They're bringing in a group that saw a lot of playing time last season. It's not inexperienced as far as backups go, but they are not starters from last year. So what's it going to take here what's your assessment, Keith, of the Georgia defense right now? What's it going to take for them to, keep at least some of the firepower that made them a good team last season?
So Kirby Smart is a smart defensive guy. I mean, it's in his name, for crying out loud.
I know. I was trying so hard to not say Kirby Smart is too smart to like take a gamble on the quarterback thing. I was trying so hard, but that's all I wanted to say.
Well, I got you covered, buddy.
Thank you.
So in saying that, he knew that there was going to be a lot of turnover on the defensive side of the ball, and it's just good practice to do this anyway, and that's to rotate your guys in and out a whole lot. A, it keeps them fresh, and B, it gets guys who might not normally get a bunch of reps, game time experience, so that when their time comes next year or the following year or whatever, they're ready, and you're not throwing out a bunch of brand new souls out there to be ripped apart by the high flying SEC East. But they lose 8 starters and 2 more depth guys on defense that played a lot last year, including their entire starting linebacking core. And as you mentioned, a guy who's like a generational player for them. And that's I don't care how much experience the guys coming in after that have. That's incredibly difficult to replace.
Right. I mean, you don't lose someone like Roquan Smith.
Yeah,
and just instantly turn around and go, okay, that's fine.
And just keep on plugging away.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's gonna be some growing pains. This Georgia squad reminds me honestly a lot of the '07 Florida team, in which they had a lot of talented guys coming in, high turnover on defense, still a lot of firepower on offense, and so they scored a whole bunch of points, but they also gave up a whole bunch of points. The games were a lot of fun to watch because there were touchdowns everywhere, but when you're a fan of a specific team, it's great to watch you score 42, 48 points a game, but it also gives you mild heart attacks every weekend watching teams stay close that probably shouldn't. And so that's the only reason why I have a question mark about Georgia going forward this year is that people seem to be really quick to say, well, they got a lot of young guys coming in, but they're all incredibly talented and they got some playing time last year, so it shouldn't be that big of an issue. I understand why they're saying it because the East is such a question mark this year, and it has been for the last really 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
But I wouldn't be, me personally, I would be a little bit skeptical of saying it's all going to be fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's enough there. There's enough loss on defense to, worry you a little bit. There's enough. And I think what a lot of Georgia, defenders are staking their claims in is that there's enough, good recruiting classes in the past few years and enough overall talent that has been brought in to hopefully plug a lot of those gaps. But they're untested. Mm-hmm. They're untested right now. Yes, you've had some guys that played a lot. And yes, you can rely on they do have returning stars, such as like DeAndre Baker, their cornerback, or safety J.R. Reed, who can lock down the secondary. But yeah, there's a lot out there. I guess for me, Chandler, when I look at the SEC East, the question that rings out here is, even if this is not as good a Georgia team as it was last year, do you look at the SEC East and see anyone there that's going to take the top spot from them, like that could right now? Or and follow up to that, if this is a quote unquote down year for Kirby Smart in Georgia while they wait for like their big time recruits to develop a little bit more, then if they go ahead and win the East again, are they ever going to lose any game ever again in the history of football?
The short answer is no. So as I was kind of looking at making picks and kind of predicting how the SEC was going to go this year, looking at Georgia's schedule, I really think they're going to be tested, and I think they're going to lose early to South Carolina. But I think that's going to be one of those things that ends up being a real benefit to them because they're going to be playing a lot of young guys on defense, a lot of inexperienced new guys, all that kind of stuff. But they had a generationally great recruiting class last season. And as we all know, that Georgia does it completely clean and above the books, and they don't cheat at all. Mm-hmm. Just like Alabama, kids,
and everybody else.
Kids turn down thousands of dollars from other schools because they just they just love the prestige of playing for Georgia or Alabama. And that's definitely how it works. But no, they've got a ton of talent. They've got a ton of great players, and it's going to, you don't want to, like, when you've got that many young guys and you've got that many incoming young defenders, you don't want to look and see guys like Jake Bentley and Deebo Samuel that early in the season. But after that, they're really not tested again until, potentially when they go to LSU, but definitely when they play Florida in the world's largest non-alcoholic outdoor party thing that they call
cocktail bowl thingy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think they'll drop one early, but they're gonna learn from that, and they're gonna grow, and they're gonna continue to get better. And I really only see them losing one game, and that's because, like I said, they're not tested again until Florida, and then they got that big game with Auburn near the end of the year. But the talent always tends to rise to the top. and they're going to find the best players that fit their defense. They're going to find the best players that fit their offense. And if they may have to lean on their offense a little bit more early in the year than they would like to. And I think that you would want to typically see a Kirby Smart team do. But I just don't think that's going to matter that much, because outside of South Carolina, there's nobody early that they play that's really, I think, going to be able to challenge them both offensively and defensively. I mean, Missouri will challenge them offensively, but I think they'll be able to, Georgia will be able to score at will against Missouri as well. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel about how they're looking.
You guys will have to excuse me. I'm a little dehydrated right now from all of Chandler's saltiness.
I'm just saying, man.
No, I completely agree with you. College football is
surrounding amateurism in college football.
No, recruiting is the worst thing.
Totally fine if Georgia and Alabama cheat because they're supposed to. But if other teams cheat, not mentioning anybody by name, but if other teams cheat, they're bad. They did it wrong.
It's just easier for the NCAA to make a statement on a team that doesn't earn them as much money as it does anyone else.
Just saying, the last time that Georgia and Ole Miss played, Ole Miss won 45-0.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever. This is bizarro world. This is where we live. But
also, Ole Miss wasn't very good, and then they hired a coach, and he brought in the top recruiting class in the country a few years ago. Same kind of thing as what's happening with Kirby Smart in Georgia.
It was the number 5 class, but point.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Anyway, so Georgia is, the defending. They're trying to defend the top spot in the East. We've mentioned now that there are some defensive question marks, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, Chandler. It really seems like, looking at the way this team is, they're going to have to rely on offense, maybe more so than they want to, or that they did this past year, and that's most likely going to be the storyline for the first few weeks. I mean, they go up against. I don't think that it's kind to them to have to go up against South Carolina so early on, and that's a game I can easily see, because I think South Carolina will be a decent squad this year. But then outside of that, they can refine some things against Austin Peay and Middle Tennessee State.
Well, and here's an interesting thing, facing Kirby Smart and then also facing Nick Saban, since apparently Kirby is Saban Jr., is that Saban has typically favored, like you said, and again, this is not a fair moniker, but you understand what I'm saying when I say it. Saban seems to have always favored the game managing quarterback, the guy who's just going to not make many mistakes. He's going to get them all the playmakers.
Yeah, they aim to have an incredible offensive line, good running back, and then protect a quarterback who won't make mistakes. Exactly.
Yeah, and both Kirby and Saban this year, which I think is just incredibly fascinating. Both of those guys this year are facing the option of you've kind of got your game manager in Jalen Hurts and Jake Fromm, or you've got your explosive, really playmaking quarterback in Tua and in Justin Fields. And I'm not trying to make Justin Fields like a Heisman contender yet or anything like that. And I don't know that Tua is a Heisman contender yet either. No. But at least the potential of the big game-breaking play is there with those guys. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that plays out, especially if, as maybe both with Alabama and Georgia, the defenses early on kind of leave a little bit to be desired.
Right.
So it's going to be. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting storylines in the SEC this year.
Is how Alabama and Georgia are mirror images of each other in structure, in a way.
The machine is real.
I do think it's very interesting because you mentioned, Jalen in particular not having like the game-breaking or playmaking, game-making play, like, ability. There we go, in him sometimes. I just, I think it's so interesting because there's some people that are starting to think when he was like a true freshman, it was a completely different offense because it was Lane Kiffin, calling the offense there. But, they did let him run a lot more and try to make more dynamic plays. And then as soon as, Kiffin's gone, Saban goes right back with, okay, that's not the offense we're really running anymore. Like, play it a little bit safer. It's a pretty odd thing.
I don't know how he is as a head coach, but Lane Kiffin is an offensive genius.
Yeah,
Lane Kiffin took Blake Sims, who was a running back, and turned him into a national championship quarterback.
Yep.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, we know how Lane Kiffin is as a head coach. But
yeah, I'm trying to keep a close eye on him as I can right now down in Florida to see exactly what that team can do.
Yeah, no, they're going to be one of the teams to watch this year, I think.
You think so?
Because and I don't want to get too off topic here, but I think if they come out and they look really good this year, you could be talking about Lane Kiffin showing back up at a Power 5 school, really, really soon.
Yeah.
And I, again, full disclosure, I'm thoroughly disappointed that Ole Miss did not even consider him as a head coach because, I mean, what do you got to lose at this point?
Yeah,
that would have been delicious.
It would have been amazing. It would have been absolutely amazing. Like, it might not have been successful, but it would have been.
But it would have been something to watch. I want to ask you guys this. I've been saving this question in the other previews for the end of things, but since we only have one other team that we preview here on the podcast, and then we move on to like our top to bottom standings, I want to go ahead and ask you right now, do you think that Georgia is going to be a better team, a worse team, or the same team? Not necessarily, again, I got to qualify this for listeners if they haven't heard the previous episodes, not necessarily in terms of record or standing, but just the way they play, how efficiently they play, how good they look on the field. Do they pass the eyeball test, But do you think, Chandler, that they're going to be a better team, the same level of play, or a worse team?
I think they're going to be a little bit worse early, but I think they've got the potential by the end of the year to be better. So it's kind of hard to look at them and predict one way or the other. But I think that they've got the talent to really bring it together. And I mean, they'll be in the SEC championship game. And I think, again, just like in the national championship game last year, they'll have a really good chance to beat Alabama. So I don't know how to answer that question, honestly. I think they'll be about the same, but they might be a little worse early.
Keith, what are you thinking?
I think that they're going to be a little bit worse. I mean, you don't lose two guys like Michelle and Chubb and just not miss a stride. Like, you don't lose the personnel that you lose on defense and not miss a stride. Like, I just don't see how they could be the same or better. And so with the lack of belief in those two things, then the only option for me is to say that they're going to not be as good.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think that kind of along those same lines, I mean, yeah, like they're going to take a step back. I mean, again, I think they're going to lose to South Carolina, and I think, because I think that's just a buzzsaw of a game. They're going to South Carolina, national TV.
Yeah, it's rough.
But at the same time, they've got a whole bunch of teams in the East that I think just, even if they take a step back, there are a whole bunch of teams that just aren't as talented as them. I mean, Missouri's got the firepower on offense. Tennessee's garbage. Vanderbilt's garbage. LSU, by the time they play them, LSU probably will have rolled over and given up. Florida will be a test. Kentucky's not going to hang with them. Auburn will be a test, but that's at Georgia. So I think that their record will be a little bit worse, but I think that by the time they get to the end of the year, they're gonna have it together. Because I think that even as you say, okay, they're probably playing some freshmen at some key spots, those kinds of things, but they're really, really, really good freshmen. They're highly touted. They're coming in. These are the guys that everybody wants. Everybody's recruiting. They can go anywhere they want, and they end up at Georgia because they definitely didn't get paid to go to Georgia. And I don't know. I think like my opinion on football is almost always that talent wins. Like, talent combined with decent coaching is going to beat experience with great coaching. And they've got talent, they've got decent coaching, and so I think that by the end of the year they're going to have it figured out.
Yeah, something that we haven't really mentioned here is that with them replacing so many guys at obviously key positions, if they start suffering injuries at those spots, and now those super talented guys go down, like, who else do you plug in there and keep going? That's going to be something that they're eventually going to have to contend with.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, the depth.
We saw it last year with Alabama. I mean, Alabama for so long, had kind of avoided the major injury bug. But early in the season, how many linebackers did they lose for the year? It was a ton of them.
And they've already lost another one for this year, right?
Lost another one for this year, and they struggled. But again, you just saw the talent at every other position kind of went out until they got healthy again, and then once they got healthy again, it was over. So
yeah, I mean, and that's where. Because you get into like college basketball, for example, and in college basketball, experience is going to beat talent most of the time. Like it's the opposite sort of thing. Like you can have all the talent in the world, but if it's a whole bunch of freshmen and you're John Calipari at Kentucky, you might get a national title if a few of them come back for another year. But most of the time, your freshman teams aren't going to make it all the way, and it's the more experienced teams that win. And it's the opposite in football.
Because again, they just love the prestige of playing for Kentucky.
Right. Well, and that one makes more sense.
Wearing that Kentucky blue just means so much more than money from other programs.
No, and John Calipari doesn't even care about that. He doesn't even pretend to care, like act like wearing the Kentucky blue is prestigious. He tells players that they can come in and play for a year and then go to the NBA, and that's what players want to hear. So I don't care. I mean, John Calipari could absolutely end up being a completely clean guy, which I don't think he is, but it doesn't matter because like he knows how to take a player and say, hey man, you want to just, diddle around for a season, then go to the NBA. Anyway, we need to move on to Auburn because this is completely off topic and that's entirely my mistake, but
I think we've gone off the rails at this point. I'm sorry.
Yeah, whatever. Georgia. No, I didn't say this, but I think that Georgia, ends up kind of staying relatively the same this year. And that being because I'm not as necessarily as concerned about the running back position. I think that DeAndre Swift will have a fine season as a running back. Mm-hmm. The big things that you can't replace with Chubb and Michelle is how well they worked together. And that's what Georgia's going to have to answer there. But offensively speaking, I mean, I think Swift's going to be fine. They've got some experienced wide receivers. They're fine. The defense is going to be interesting to see. But I think this will be a Georgia team where if you had the offense and the defense together last season, the defense takes a little bit of a step down. The offense takes a little bit of a step up.
Yeah.
And so I think Georgia can be considered the same this year. That's my pick, at least. The Auburn Tigers finished the last season in the top spot in the West. They upset two number one teams in a row, their hated rivals, the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide, at the end of last regular season. Went to the SEC championship, lost to the real national champions, University of Central Florida, in the postseason.
Take, Alabama did not deserve to be in the playoffs last year. Central Florida did.
So, yeah, agreed. So Auburn is an interesting team to look at this year because, I mean, they kind of came out of nowhere to steal that number one in the West spot, and it didn't necessarily pay off for them. There's a lot of people that are thinking highly about the Tigers. There's a lot of people that maybe think that they're a little bit overrated. There's a lot of opinions about Auburn right now. We actually brought in a guest to tell us a little bit about the Auburn Tigers. We have Auburn graduate, Auburn resident. He lives a stone's throw away from, just for his sake, I'll pronounce it the weird way, the weird wrong way that Auburn people say it, Jordan hair, as opposed to the real American way, Jordan hair.
Definitely Jordan.
Yeah. So Suge Jordan was a jerk anyway. So this is Chad Gibbs, a friend of mine who is an author. He wrote a book a few years back called God and Football, about faith and fanaticism, covering the two loves of the Southeast, college football and church, along with some other books, Love Thy Rival, in particular about some of big sports, big rivalries, and has been actually on Outside the Lines with Bob Lee a few times.
Whoa, now.
Yeah, which is crazy.
That's celebrity status.
Which is crazy.
Straight cred.
So we're going to turn over to Chad so we can get him on here and talk about the Tigers for a little bit. Here we are talking about the Auburn Tigers. So Chad, Auburn football so far under the offensive leadership of Gus Malzahn, either as like a coordinator or as a head coach. If you go back to his, both times that he's been around, his scheme seems to find success almost entirely based on having a consistent, productive quarterback, more so than maybe some other offensive schemes you might see. When he doesn't have somebody reliable there, it shows. But when he does have somebody there, it makes the world of difference. And we've seen that a few notable times. Just a quick jumping back over the few years. Obviously, last year you had Jared Stidham there, takes him to an SEC championship game. You go back a few more years, you had Nick Marshall at one point, maybe not the best quarterback, but a reliable playmaker, and takes him to a title game. Cam Newton before that, when he's a coordinator, wins everything. And then in between, there's these years where there's question marks at the quarterback position.
Yes.
The Sean Whites, the Kyle Frazier's,
Jeremy
Johnson and Barrett Trotter, not like awful years, still winning seasons, 7-8 wins most of the time. I think there's one exception. And, but that being said, you're looking at a season where not only are you coming off of really the first time in all these runs, you're coming off of a year where you have the consistent productive quarterback and he's returning.
Yeah.
How big is that for the team?
I think it's huge. The only other similar year would be 2014. Nick Marshall came back for a second year. And that team was a little different than the 2013 team. Trey Mason was gone. Greg Robinson, the big left tackle, and that was what that team lacked. Was you get down in the red zone, get down on the 5-yard line, and in 2013 they would just run those read options to the left side, and either Marshall or Trey Mason would dive in.
Yeah, one of them had it. Just kind of knew it.
And in 2014, we would run 3 plays and not score, kick a field goal like every time. I think that Iron Bowl that year, Bama won 55-44, and I want to say Auburn had 5 field goals in that game, short field goals, like really short field goals, and that's you're just like, oh, you could have punched some of those in.
Right.
But no, having Stidham back, and he's experienced, but in a lot of ways he was almost like a freshman again last year. He had only played a couple games as a true freshman at Baylor, and then or maybe a redshirt, I'm not sure. And then he took a year off. He didn't even play. He took a year off and just kind of hung out.
Yeah, it's one of the stranger situations that I've
went
seen.
to a high school. He was like on a high school scout team, I think. And so last year he was like a very experienced freshman in a weird way. But he played really well, and by the end of the year, he's playing great. And everyone seems pretty excited about having him back and what the offense can do next year. The schedule is it's flipped. It's you got those 2 big games on that you had in Jordan-Hare last year, where you played number 1 back-to-back at home.
Right.
Now you got to go to Athens and to Tuscaloosa.
Yeah.
But with a more experienced quarterback, so it's. But no, that's going to be key this year. It's going to be if Stidham can perform like he did last year, and I think all most signs point to yes, but it's football, so who knows?
Yeah, you can never.
Well,
really tell.
It's Auburn football, so who really knows?
Yeah, you've had. I mean, this year, there are in particular. There's 4 away games, and then there's the game in Atlanta.
Yeah,
which is
whatever that is.
Whatever that is. So practically a home game.
Definitely against Washington. Yeah,
Exactly.
We're 90 minutes away, and they're
my in-laws, all being Washington people. I don't think they're traveling to that one. I don't think. But maybe the toughest opponents on the season all happen to be the away games as well, which is kind of a tricky thing. Not only do you have what you just mentioned, Georgia and Alabama on the road, you also have to travel to the 2 Mississippi schools. Mississippi State being a team that a lot of people are thinking could have a top 3 finish this season in the SEC West. Ole Miss has one of the best groups of wide receivers in the country. And almost definitely in the conference, but across the whole country. So, yeah, what are the road expectations? You got if last year was a good year, maybe as far as scheduling goes for someone like Stidham to come in and take the reins. I mean, this is you just said it's the opposite end of things. What are kind of the expectations for the schedule?
You know, my personal expectations is that it's going to be really difficult. That just that seems to be the trend the last 10 years. That these games they're just hard to win, and it seems like it's the difference between an 8-5 season and like an 11-2 season or something like that. I think that was something you emailed sort of talking about. The good seasons are usually followed up by 8-5, and that seems to me to be a big part of it. Is 2010 you got Bama actually Bama was on the road in 2010, but the schedule seems to flip, and you're going to see these tougher places, and that's the challenge. It's the schedule, the actual the ordering of the schedule seems to set up pretty good. Maybe apart from that first game at Washington, that's one of those who knows what to expect kind of games.
It's a strange. I mean, it's hard to get motivated for because it's a big opponent to open the season, but also you're not
top 10 game, but
you're not you can't open it up at home, and so you can't. It's a quote unquote neutral site thing. It's just strange.
Yeah, it's going to feel like a Peach Bowl,
right?
And not like like the national semifinal or national championship game Peach Bowl or whatever they call it when they play it there now. I'm talking about like the old December 31st Peach Bowl where you're playing an ACC team that's kind of mediocre.
Right.
This is the atmosphere. It can't. It's going to be different. And I don't know if we want to get into that or not, but my disdain for these neutral site games
No, I'd love to hear why. I want to hear that now.
I just don't know.
You piqued my interest.
I just don't understand them. I mean, I don't know why you want to college football. The thing it has going for it is the atmosphere.
Right.
The product, the on-field product is, inferior to NFL games.
Right.
And they're longer. They're like an hour longer, I feel like. And but it's the atmosphere and the pageantry and all that. And they're like, no, let's go play it in the Falcon Stadium and give it this very sterile feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's about money. Chick-fil-A is paying everybody a fortune to do it, but I mean, let Chick-fil-A paint a big cow in the center of Jordan-Hare and play it at home. Because it's also
set up a huge Chick-fil-A trailer right outside the stadium where everyone's tailgating. Let them have all the marketing, all of the logos for a weekend, and just absolutely.
Yeah, because it costs the city of Auburn a fortune with the retailers and the restaurants and the hotels, and it also keeps you from getting to go to a really cool road game. College football fans love to travel and to get to go to Seattle and go to Washington, or Auburn's playing UNC in a couple of years in Atlanta, and you're like, have a home and away. Let us go to Chapel Hill one year and let them come here. That'd be so much cooler than playing in the Falcon, playing in Atlanta United Stadium.
Right. Yeah, it's not even the Falcon Stadium. It's Atlanta United Stadium. I mean, that's a good point. I mentioned my in-laws being from Washington. They would, I get over there and we sit around the past few years, New Year's, Christmas, whatever. There's, Washington's either in the playoff or they're in a bowl game, and we're sitting around, the whole family's around watching, and all the uncles are like, so what's it like being in SEC country? And I'm like, oh, guys, it is the most overrated thing. But I play it up. I play it up for them. I'm like, oh, it's just insane. Everyone's just, you got entire chandeliers hanging from the tents in the grove. So if it was on Auburn's campus, home and away thing, they would be significantly more willing to travel to that than to just go to Atlanta and hang out.
Atlanta, yeah. But anyway.
Okay, back to Auburn then.
So anyway, but I was saying the schedule sets up. Apart from that game, you kind of ease into some of these road games. You've got a good home schedule too. You got LSU and Tennessee and A&M at home, and so no, it's a tough schedule, but it should be fun. A few years ago when we switched to when the SEC expanded, Auburn and Georgia's got flip flopped. Mm-hmm. And Auburn played 2 home games in a row. and lost them both. And so now Auburn and Georgia, the Georgia and Alabama games are at home. It used to be they alternated. You had one at home and one on the road. And I would be willing to go to Athens twice just to sort of get that off, because I'm ready. It's not my favorite. It's great the years that you have them both at home, but the years that you're not, October 31st comes around, you're like, oh, that's the last game we're going to go see at Jordan Hare this year. It's kind of over now, because you may play like Liberty or somebody, but I don't think I'd go see Auburn play Liberty if it was in my backyard. And you've been to my house. It literally almost is in my backyard.
Right. Yeah. You got to get through the bamboo thicket back there.
Yeah.
I'm apologize to anyone listening to this who's a big fan of the Liberty Flames and is offended by this. I'm sure we got a lot of Flames listeners.
I'm sure we do.
Do you think they'd say like Flames Athletics? It's always tricky when your mascot just is like a plural statement, basically, like it's one thing. It's like, oh, the Tigers, you got one individual. It's like, yeah, I'm a Tiger. And this is, Tiger Athletics. You can say that. Yeah. Makes sense. Don't just say do you say Flames Athletics?
Well, I mean, I guess Bama's, there's the Crimson Tide, but it's sort of similar.
Yeah.
Tide Athletics, Tides.
Yeah. Yeah. The Tides. Here they
Tides.
All right. Anyway, in light of the schedule, in light of it being a successful season, in light of beating the rivals back to back, number one in the country, pulling off those victories, you do have, of course, the negative side of that, where in the past, when those good years we've mentioned, 2010, 2013, in particular, those are 14 and 12 win seasons. Mm-hmm. And last year ended up being 10 wins, because the last two games of the season, the SEC championship game and then the bowl game as well, to the eventual national champion UCF, where both ended up being losses. So do you think that this is a motivating factor to say, okay, like last season ended poorly, we're here to make a statement this year that doesn't define where we go from here,
Yeah, I think that could be sort of something that's motivated them through the off season. It was a weird end to the season. The Georgia game was so weird. And like the Auburn Georgia, the home game was weird too. Like the score in the end looks pretty lopsided, but that game, it was not out of hand in the third quarter. And in the Auburn, in the SEC championship game, I'd have to go look this up. But I feel like Auburn had the ball down 13-7 midway through the third quarter, and Kerryon Johnson was playing with a bum shoulder, and he fumbled. We were about midfield, and he fumbled, and that was kind of the last good. That was, it just really went downhill from there. But that game was close into the third quarter too. It did leave a sour taste, and the Central Florida game. I mean, I don't know. I'm past the point of getting upset about bowl games anymore.
No. Like you can enjoy. Like if it's a victory, it's like, man, that was great. I'm glad we ended on that note. And if it's a loss, it's kind of like,
because I follow people on Twitter who just go crazy. I'm like, how can you even care about this? No one playing it looks like they really care.
They're just there for the gift bags, man.
Yes, all the swag, the Xboxes and whatever else. But no, I do think that's something that may sort of motivate the team this year. But who knows? I don't know what that really means. Like,
right. Like, I mean,
is it? I mean, I guess if it makes them work harder all through the off season, but like once you got into a game, I can't imagine that they're like, oh, we lost those last two games.
I can't believe it.
Keep fighting.
I did pull up the scoring summary on that SEC championship game, and you were right. Yeah, it was. I mean, Georgia got a field goal with a minute and a half left in the third to go up 13-7. So
yeah.
I mean, it really just was like the fourth quarter. There's two touchdowns there, and it makes it look a lot worse than it actually was.
Yeah, but it was one of those games where I'm sure you've seen State play games like this where you're just like, this isn't our day.
That's most of my lifetime having gone to Mississippi State games. Yeah.
But that game kind of had that feeling, and Auburn scored super quick to start the game, and that's sort of a curse for Auburn. If Auburn scores within the first 3 minutes, you're like, oh geez, this is not going to get well.
We peaked early. We peaked too early.
But I think Auburn fans, I can tell that Auburn Twitter is getting a little nervous about expectations.
Yeah.
Now that people are starting to kind of talk about them as, what they might do this season. I don't know if you saw I'm not even sure who did it, which one of the sites did it, but since the AP poll came into existence in whatever 1941 or whatever,
right.
The most preseason, the most overrated and underrated teams of all time. Or the most, I forget. I don't know if that's how they worded it or not.
Yeah, probably so. I haven't seen that.
But Auburn's numbers are insane on there. I think they lead both categories, and they lead the most underrated significantly, 7 times in the 70-year history. They were the team that everyone was like, they're not going to be any good, and then they win 12 games, and then and then anytime they're like, oh yeah, Auburn's going to win 12 games this year. 7-6 or something along those lines. But
I'm gonna have to look this up now because this would be fascinating to actually put on the podcast. So I'm making a note to look it up.
Yeah, look it up. I should have looked it up beforehand, but
that's incredible. That is incredible. The expectations. No kidding. I mean, welcome to sports. The expectations it seems to be pretty high. There's a lot of national media that are saying that. I mean, it's Auburn and Bama 1 and 2, in the West, trying to figure out probably Bama number 1, but Auburn number 2 is kind of what I've seen most places. So the expectations are, second in the division for sure. So let's look at some of the personnel that are actually on the team instead of these hypotheticals that we were discussing, and see just kind of who is coming in here. Offensively speaking, we've mentioned, of course, Stidham, an experienced freshman from last year, as you said, and he's back now, a promising passer with it seems a lot of wide receiver options coming back, but or not really a newcomer, but a new starter running back in Cam Martin. Maybe not starter, but he's the guy that I think everyone is expecting to carry the load now.
Yeah.
And having to replace a handful of starters on the offensive line. Does any of that worry you at all, knowing that, especially in light of this, I thought there was an interesting stat that Auburn is one of only 2 schools to have a 1,000-yard rusher in each of the past 9 seasons.
Yeah, and that's why running back does not concern me, because that's just sort of seems like an Auburn thing. You're like, oh yeah, we'll have good running backs, of course. Who are they? I don't know, but they'll be good. The line, that's, and this is sort of where your listeners will start to see how little I paid attention to football in the off season. And I've gotten to the point where I don't really start paying attention to midway through the season if we're good. And that's when I start learning players' names,
right?
Particularly the linemen. If the season starts to unravel, I'll never know who these linemen were. I won't even bother to learn their names.
You failed me, fat man. You're dead to me now.
Yeah, exactly. But just sort of the vibe I get from following all these Auburn people on Twitter is hope that for the offensive line, it's sort of a promising young bunch, and some of these guys will step up and fill holes. But it's you never know. But running back, I'm not as concerned with. I feel like Auburn recruits well at running back, and that's just for some reason a position that you stick a guy in the backfield with an AU on their helmet, they're going to get 1,000 yards. That's just what they do.
No, I mean it's comfortable place to be for sure, to just kind of know that whatever else happens. And maybe that's why I almost just said the Gene Chizik offense. I apologize. The Gus Malzahn offense is so like specifically quarterback oriented when it comes to like success levels. Like if they have, production from the quarterback, it's because it seems like it's just expected. There's going to be a decent rushing game. There's going to be a good running back there who's productive enough. And so it's just whether there's a quarterback there to push him over the edge, maybe.
Yeah, basically, because like you're talking about, all those years in between the good years, and some of them pretty bad, there were still a decent rushing game.
Mm-hmm.
But the passing game and the and even some, the quarterback running the ball is a pretty big part of that offense as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something Stidham brings to the table. It's he's talked about as a pretty high draft pick maybe. So I don't know how much they're going to want to how much they're going to want to run him, but he'll definitely get some yards this year, I would think.
What's that? Your projected first rounder? Why don't you go there and take some hits for a little while? I did actually find what it is you were referencing. It was SB Nation, who I think is the only website to follow when it comes to sports, honestly. I get tired of the other ones. NBA offseason really did me in, trying to tune into ESPN, and it's just like, LeBron went to the Lakers so early that they had to make up stories to talk about revolving around LeBron going to the Lakers. So anyway, SB Nation, they were the ones who counted it up, and they went back all the way to the AP polls origins, and I guess they went all the way back down to 1950.
Okay.
Auburn 7 times, and then there are 5 schools, Arkansas, Houston, Iowa, Michigan State, Washington State, that are tied for 3 times behind them.
Yes.
So,
and you can, I think there's a link on that article to the one he did with the most sort of overrated ones too. So
I hope so. I'm gonna try to find that one as well. But that is phenomenal to look at. That's Jason Kirk, who is I think the editor of College Football on SB Nation.
So, and that's Auburn fans just love the underdog role, and they cringe at being a favorite, and it it bears out historically.
It makes a lot more sense. Defensively speaking, there's a real good front seven. It looks like that. I think I've read that there's a lot of people expecting multiple defensive linemen to be drafted to the NFL from this Auburn team. They're returning several linebackers, productive linebackers, so there's a lot of depth there as well. The secondary is really the part in the defense that maybe there's questions about, just because it seems like there's a lot of fresh faces there or whatever. But I guess the question is, with all of the talent that's there right now, it seems like under an offensive mind coach, put air quotes around that, like Malzahn, defenses tend to maybe fly under the radar a little bit. But how much do you think it's time to give the Auburn defense just a little bit more credit? Is this the year maybe?
Well, yeah, last year was good. It was in my memory maybe the best defense there'd been since the Tuberville years. And they may take a step up this year. It looks, like you said, the front seven looks nasty, and there's a lot of youth in the backfield, but if your front seven's that nasty, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
That can make a lot of freshman defensive backs look like Dion.
Yeah, exactly.
If the quarterback has a half a second to get the ball off. So I'd much rather have a NFL caliber front four and an inexperienced back four than the other way around.
Right.
Because those guys, you can't chase receivers all day.
Right. And it makes a huge difference in the college game.
Yeah. And if the offense is clicking and it's a good year Malzahn offense and you're putting a lot of points on the board, a defense, they don't have to shut people out, but you get a couple turnovers or a couple of pin people back inside their 10, and all of a sudden it's 28-7 in the first quarter. Well, that's the other Auburn problem I feel like we've had in the Malzahn era, is getting up 21 or 28-7 in the first quarter, and then like, what do we do now? How do we hang on to this lead? Kind of a Liverpool problem.
We've done too well too early.
Yeah. We scored 4 goals in the first half, but we don't really know how to hold on. We don't know how to play if we're not just still scoring goals. So.
Right. And that's actually something that we've talked about on the podcast before and it's come up a few times now, but you look at some of the teams, in particular, I believe it's Ole Miss and Missouri that had an issue last season where their offense was too fast several times for the defense to get rested and catch up. And so you had these offensive drives that just, it was like instant points, yay, and then the defense can't do anything about it.
The Cam Newton year, the defense was opportunistic. Like, they weren't great, but they would, it was just all you kind of wanted them to do was get a stop or a turnover.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, okay, now we're up a possession, so we're going to win. Because there were a lot of high scoring kind of wild games with that team. But I think this defense has a chance to sort of control games, which is something that hasn't always been in this post-Tuberville world.
Yeah. Is this – so you're thinking this is probably the best since then for sure?
I think so.
Yeah.
And, this is also coming from a guy who can name maybe 3 or 4 defenders right now. I know we have a defensive end named Big Cat.
Yes, I'm aware of him. I love it. Well, you mentioned it briefly earlier, but it needs to be repeated again. Those best years, I don't know why I said the word years so weird right then, but those best years at Auburn in the past decade or so have been followed up by a pair of 8-5 seasons. The 2010 season, of course, national title. Cam Newton, he leaves, and it's 8-5 after that. Then, of course, it's 3-9. That's where you have the one like real rough year that cost Chiswick his job.
Yeah, but Gus wasn't around for that one. He was
exactly.
In Arkansas,
so Gus leaves. He comes back, and it's instantly 12-2. But after that, again, 8-5. Mm-hmm. So it stands to reason that with this being the third good year with Gus Malzahn present in the coaching staff, what's it going to take? The final verdict. What is it going to take to avoid another 8-5 season this year?
I don't know.
Yeah, and you can't answer with winning more than 8 games. That one won't get.
Because I can see it. Like I can see how 8-5 would happen so easily.
Yeah.
As you go to Athens and you go to Tuscaloosa and you start the season with number 6, and like you go to State and LSU comes here. It's an A&M. Who knows? I mean, it's.
And you can't overlook that Liberty game, November 17th, man.
You can't overlook the Flame.
You can't overlook the Flame. Flame football, baby.
So I don't know. And like we said earlier, the 2013 team, this is very similar, with a disappointing end to a crazy good season, with the quarterback coming back. It's so similar. So I don't know. I don't know what Auburn can do to avoid it. If I knew I'd get paid, I'd be paid a lot more. I almost hit Gus Malzahn today. I haven't even told Trisha about this. So he drives this crazy little 2-door Mercedes sports car.
Sure.
And I'm coming home from the coffee shop down Donahue, and they've got half the road blocked for tree. They're trimming trees. And they're waving people, like they're stopping one lane and waving a lane. And he waves me, and I go, and Gus comes out of the parking lot of the athletic complex because he's not being waved, or they don't know. They're not worried about cars coming out of the parking lot. And we nearly just go straight into each other. We made eye contact.
But how was he reacting? Was he like
just kind of wide-eyed, like, "What are you doing?" And I'm kind of like, "What are you doing?"
Calm down, Gus.
Yeah. So I don't know if that's a good omen or
We're going to revisit this conversation at the end of the season and say, hey, Auburn is expected to do either this well or this poorly based entirely on whether or not Chad almost hits the head coach in his card before the season starts.
But I don't know, and I don't even know how I feel about the season. I honestly don't feel great. Like I kind of have that, oh no, we're supposed to be good, we're not going to be that good feeling.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll surprise me. So, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. If you're the underdog, then it's like, great, we don't have anything to lose.
Yeah.
we're projected to not do very well. Let's go out there and prove some people wrong. Now it's like, oh, we're the favorites. We have to go out and prove people right. This is terrible.
This is not as fun.
It's just, no, it's not. It's absolutely not. Well, I will end on this note. Do you happen to know who the head coach of the Liberty Flames is?
Jerry Falwell Jr.
He wishes. No, man, it's actually Buffalo and Kansas coaching legend Turner Gill.
Turner Gill. Auburn almost hired Turner Gill.
Well, he's at Liberty now.
Charles Barkley was really angry at the time that we hired Gene Chizik and not Turner Gill.
Bet he forgot all about that when that second year under Chizik happened, huh?
Yeah, but in retrospect, it was kind of like, neither one of those probably was going to work out to great long run. But
I don't know what exactly Turner Gill has been doing since 2011. But he has a gap in his coaching resume where he left Kansas, or I guess was fired from Kansas, or whatever you do. I don't know. Yeah. Does Kansas fire football coaches, or do they just do the coaches just not show up one day in Kansas?
They just walk away.
It happened again. But he's back. He's back at Liberty. Maybe this is where he excels. Watch out.
Maybe.
That's the game to circle on your calendar. If you're a neutral observer, that November 17th, Liberty Flames at Auburn Tigers.
And if you need tickets, we have 4 that we will not be using.
Hey, man, I might take you up on that. I did get recruited to be a student at Liberty quite a bit when I was coming out of high school for some reason.
Did you? Okay.
Yep. Don't understand why, but only 3 schools ever sent me any information. And one was Liberty.
My youth minister played football at Liberty. He started at Auburn and got mono and lost a bunch of weight and got sick and transferred to Liberty. While he was there, he and a bunch of other offensive linemen started a power team. You familiar with power teams?
Yeah.
Okay, so when he got to my church, I was maybe an 8th grader. He started a youth power team. And I was on it for about 6 months.
For anyone listening to this podcast, we forgot to mention that Chad is 6'8", 325 pounds of pure muscle.
Or 5'11", 180 pounds of dad flab. But I did one show, and I ripped a phone book in 2 and threw it into the air. That was my only contribution to the power team.
But hey, you learned the trick to the phone book.
Yeah, if you have a phone book, man, I will rip it in 2 for you.
I'm going to hold you to that one of these days.
Okay.
One of these days. Chad, thanks for joining us on this episode.
It was a pleasure. Anytime.
Running out the clock. We appreciate the wit and sometimes the insight, but mostly the wit.
Yeah.
Thanks again, Chad.
All right. War Eagle.
All right. Thank you again, Chad, for joining us on Running Out the Clock.
Thanks, Chad.
I'm sure that was a segment that everyone will listen to and enjoy thoroughly. Guys, we have to ask the question about the Auburn Tigers now. They bring back some firepower, of course, and Jared Stidham. They have some maybe untested but very promising running backs coming in. They have one of the most stout defensive front sevens in all of college football. So the question is Auburn, as a team that returns a lot of talent but has a significantly nastier schedule this season, a team that will be better, the same, or worse this year? This year? Why did I add an H on that? Chandler, what do you think?
Well, it's hard to say that Auburn's going to be better because, they won the SEC West last year and we're kind of right, we're right there in the conversation to make the playoff. So, and I'll say this, if the Iron Bowl was in Auburn, I would say they would be about the same because they have the recipe for what I love in a great football team, and that is a good, experienced quarterback and a nasty front seven.
Yeah.
And when you have those two things, you're going to win a lot of games. But I think just having to go to Alabama at the end of the year is going to make them just a hair worse than they were last year.
Keith, what about you?
I would definitely share the same sentiment. I think on the field they're going to be about the same talent wise, but their schedules I think is going to force them into a situation where their record and their outcomes are going to be just a little bit worse.
It's football is a simple game at its core. You control the line of scrimmage, and most of the time you find success in that sort of way. And that front seven is disgusting on defense. The offensive line is a little bit less so. They lose 4 starters on the offensive line, which is one of the more difficult things to replace is when you lose a bulk of your offensive line. And that's one that, because offensive line is something like, if you don't have experience, you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have a lot of experience, it shows a little bit more than maybe in some of the other positions. So yeah, I would say maybe a hair worse for the Auburn Tigers in regard to the fact that they might not be able to give Stidham or up-and-coming running back Cam Martin enough time and space to succeed on the same level. Defense, if Georgia was a step down on defense and a step up on offense, I think it's going to be the complete opposite side for Auburn. They're going to be a step down on offense, but probably a step up on defense this year.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with
that. Hey, Chandler, since you're speaking into a headset or the little earbuds, make sure that microphone doesn't get tangled up in the beard.
Like this?
Yeah, thank you.
Fear the beard.
Sorry about that.
No worries. It only happened once, so I wanted to remind you real quick before we got into it.
You should be sorry. Never let it happen again.
I was sorry.
Yeah, he did, Keith.
Yeah.
That will do it for our individual team previews, which is hard to believe. We've only been making these team preview episodes for a year and a half now. Wow, time surely flies.
It legitimately seems like this has lasted forever.
Yeah. My God, we need the season to start. Just give us anything to actually talk about. I mean, the next episode we record will actually be like talking about the matchups and predicting what happens in week 1. We're going to be talking about the Knowles. That's it. I'm making the executive decision right now. Next week, we will do what we do on ROTC. We will predict all the games in the SEC. We will predict one random matchup, and we're going to predict the Knowles.
Yes, we need to predict the Knowles every week.
Yep, there it is. It's happening now. I'm making it happen. All right, we need to give our overall standings predictions. We'll divide it up by division, not overall, and talk about who we think are going to win everything this year. Boys, I'm going to give you the option right now of whether or not I should read Roe Hunters on the air first or last. You have any opinions here?
Go ahead and read it first.
Yeah, first is good.
I feel like you got drunk and picked it. So,
as a punishment for refusing to be on this podcast, Roe Hunter will have to have his predictions read first, and then we'll make fun of him or something, and then we'll move on with our lives. In the East, he is predicted from bottom to top: Vanderbilt last, Missouri, Tennessee, Kentucky, South Carolina, Florida, and then Georgia. So I will now read it from top to bottom. Georgia finishes first, Florida 2, South Carolina 3rd, Kentucky 4th, Tennessee 5th, Missouri 6th, Vanderbilt 7th. In the West, he picks in an upset pick Mississippi State to win the West, number 1, Alabama number 2, Auburn number 3, A&M number 4, Ole Miss number 5, Arkansas 6, LSU 7th. Mississippi State and Georgia in the SEC championship game with Mississippi State victory to win the SEC. And I guess therefore like make it to the playoffs probably.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, by that logic. So I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb here and say he's probably the only one to not pick Alabama to win the SEC out of all of us. Is that right?
I think so.
Probably accurate.
He goes ahead and makes the bold pick there that none of us agree with. Is there anything else in the lineup, and without spoiling your own, so real quick, is there anything else that you guys vehemently disagree with as far as his picks go? Anything that stands out? I don't really see much.
Yeah,
I see
like it's kind of hard to be really passionate about anything other than the winner of the East and the West, because I think that really once you get past Alabama and Auburn in the West, and then you get past Georgia in the East, I really think you could just throw every team up in the air in whatever order they land in. You'd probably be right.
Yeah, it almost seems that way. At least I think so.
Yeah, I would apply that logic maybe to the first few teams behind those three teams that you mentioned. I don't think that we could throw Tennessee up in the air and they land anywhere except for the bottom of the ocean.
That's true. Vanderbilt and Tennessee are far and away going to be Vanderbilt, Tennessee, Arkansas. I think are far and away going to be the worst.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that Rose says that I really disagree with. Outside of what we've already mentioned, is that he picked Missouri to do very poorly in the East, and I don't see that happening this year. I don't see him finishing next to last, only above Vanderbilt. Chandler, you get seniority on account of the fact that you've done the most episodes with me on Running Out the Clock. Would you like to go ahead and give your picks?
Yeah, let's do it. You want the East or the West first?
Let's go with the. What did I gave the East for Roe, right? Go with the East.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in the East, I have Georgia finishing with a 7-1 SEC record with a loss to South Carolina, but ultimately that doesn't end up hurting them that much. Number 2, I've got Florida. Number 3, I've got South Carolina. I think I've got Florida and South Carolina both with a 6-2 SEC record, but Florida winning the head-to-head over South Carolina. I've got Missouri at 4-4 in the SEC, Kentucky at 2-6, Tennessee at 1-7, and then Vanderbilt at 0-8. So that's how I see the East kind of shaking out. There's nothing particularly notable there because I think that I really do think that even as I think South Carolina is probably going to sneak up on Georgia and beat them early. I think that by the end of the year that there's not really going to be a ton there for the East to really compete with Georgia. And I think that Florida probably is just not going to have the firepower, I think, to hang quite yet this year because Florida also has let me consult my notes here. Florida's also got to go to Starkville and play Mississippi State, and I don't think they're going to win that game. So that's kind of how I see the East shaking out. In the West, I've got Alabama with a 12-0 record. I think they're going to go 8-0 in the SEC. Auburn, I've got them at 6-2. I've got Texas A&M also at 6-2 with the tiebreaker over Auburn with a tiebreaker over Texas A&M, who's going to be number 3 at 6-2 in the SEC West. And then I've got Mississippi State going 4-4. I've got Ole Miss going 3-5 at number 5, and then I've got LSU at number 6 going 2-6, and then Arkansas going 1-7 because Arkansas gets to play Vanderbilt. So that'll be the thing that Chad Morris should be just incredibly thankful for. I think the notable thing there is LSU. LSU being 6th in the West. I don't think they're going to be last just because I think Arkansas is going to be that bad. But as we've already talked on this show before, LSU's schedule is murderer's row. I mean, even if you give them the Ole Miss win, which I'm not ready to give them, but I went ahead and gave them in my predictions here. Even if you give them the Ole Miss win, that's 5-7. Because I can't look at them and think, I can't think they're gonna beat Miami. I can't think they're gonna go to Auburn and win. I can't think they're gonna go to Florida and win. I don't think they're gonna beat Georgia. I don't think they're gonna beat Mississippi State. I don't think they're gonna beat Alabama. I don't think they're gonna beat Texas A&M. And so if for some reason Ole Miss comes in there fired up, ready to play, if for some reason Louisiana Tech decides hey, this is the year we want to do it, it could get really, really, really bad for LSU. And so the only reason I didn't pick them last is because Arkansas does exist in this timeline.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's going to be a rough year for LSU. But I do have Alabama versus Georgia in the SEC championship, and I've got Alabama winning. Hashtag RTR Paul, and yeah, that's kind of how I see it shaking out.
Hashtag RTR Paul.
I actually wrote hashtag RTR Paul on the piece of paper I did my prediction.
Oh, I know. You sent me a picture of it. We're going to put it up on the ROTC website after this. If you want to find that, that's at rotc.podbean.com. Keith, how are your predictions looking?
Remarkably similar, except for one pick that is probably a mistake. But you know what? I'm going to totally own it. So we're going to start out east, and you can probably guess it. I'm gonna pour some of my heart into these picks and go with Florida winning the East. Followed up closely, of course, by Georgia, then South Carolina, then Kentucky, then Missouri, then Tennessee, and then Vandy. I joked with Joseph right before we started this that Florida, Georgia, and South Carolina to me are kind of a 1A, B, and C, in that it wouldn't seem totally outlandish if any of them win that conference or win the division, at least. Florida maybe a little bit so, but Florida's schedule, at least who they play, when, and where is hugely important. Their toughest road game outside of Florida State is going to be Mississippi State. They have LSU at home, Georgia's neutral site. They have South Carolina at home. They have Missouri at home. Those all fall favorably to Florida. Georgia has to go to LSU, and I know that Chandler's probably laughing because he thinks that LSU is going to be just the world's biggest dumpster fire straight out of the gate. But LSU is always a tough place to play at, even in their down years. They've been really tough to play at,
which is stupid.
At home, yeah, it's kind of bizarre, but it's one of those things. And of course, you know, Georgia goes to South Carolina early. It's going to be crazy there. So there's a potential for that kind of trip up there. Not saying that Florida doesn't have its own trap games, but you know, I'm just going to go out on a limb here and say that Florida has a lot of talent that was untapped last year. And they get Jordan Scarlett back, and that's nothing to overlook. Jordan Scarlett's a very talented running back. I think he's going to make a huge difference. So anyway, with that out of the way, the West is going to be sort of, I think, pretty standard. I think Alabama wins the West. Auburn behind them, MSU coming in at third, followed by A&M, and then Chandler, this one's for you. LSU, then Ole Miss, then Arkansas. Not necessarily because I think that Ole Miss is a worse team than LSU, but again, I think those last three teams you can put them in a cup and shake it and roll them out, and wherever they go, it's reasonable to say that they probably deserve to be there.
Yeah, I think the thing there is, you know, I think a lot of the Death Valley, you know, LSU at night, all that, LSU's a tough place to play. I think a lot of that mystique is a little bit overblown, because I've seen teams, I mean, like, I've been there in person before when a comparably talented Ole Miss team went there and just kicked the crap out of them. And I think that Georgia, top to bottom, I think they just got more talent.
Oh,
the inexperience may play into it, but I just don't think Fromm's offense is going to get rattled when they go there. And I think too that by the time LSU plays Georgia, that's kind of, I mean, that's even a little bit after their Murderers Row, if I'm not mistaken. That's like midpoint of the season. So, you know, I mean, they could have thrown in the towel already at that point. So, but no, I mean, I think your picks are as valid as any, just because I think outside of those winners of each division, it's hard to know for sure what's going to happen. And I don't, Florida's going to have to be a lot more explosive on offense for me to, like, I'm going to have to see them be
for sure
on offense. But I definitely think with Florida, let me put it this way. I think the same about Florida as I think about Texas A&M. I think that they have recruited a lot better and their talent is a lot better than their record the last few years have really indicated. And so I think that Jimbo Fisher and Dan Mullen both can get more out of those teams than their previous coaches did. I just don't know if I see that being something that wins in the East. But I can definitely see Florida taking a big step up just because of the talent that they've recruited in the last few years.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that.
Fair enough. Good discussion here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and round us out with my picks real quick.
Hit it.
Not a huge amount of differences going on here. There's a few things that I will mention as I go through my list. I also think that Georgia secures the East. I don't think that they are as good a squad as far as, last year went. I don't think they're going to be number one in the country, and securing the East type of thing. But I do think they have enough in them to secure the East. I think that, and this is where things get real tricky, these next few are ones I feel like could be a huge toss-up in a lot of ways, but this is the order I decided to go with. I decided to go with South Carolina hitting the number 2 spot. I decided to go with my surprise in the East, Missouri, doing enough to land up in the number 3. I have hopes that the Missouri Tigers get enough clicking this year, because that's kind of the big storyline with them is, like, we know there's talent there, especially on offense, but can they actually get it to gel enough to have that sort of success? I'm going to be the optimist for the Missouri Tigers and say, yes, this is the year they get enough of it gelling to land up in the top 3 in the East. Florida's right behind them. I think the transition is going to be a little bit tricky, but I think that by this time next year, we'll be talking about Florida as being, comfortable with Mullen's offensive scheme and with Todd Grantham's defense. If Florida doesn't get frustrated at Todd Grantham and fire him. Kentucky after that, Tennessee after that, Vanderbilt after that. Kentucky, same squad as always. They're going to do enough to kind of make it to a bowl game, but that's it. And then Tennessee and Vandy are what they are right now. We'll see if Tennessee can ever rebuild in the future, but as for now, this is where they are. In the West, Alabama as the number 1 spot. I don't feel comfortable with this, but I do think the schedule is favorable enough that Mississippi State could hit that number 2 spot there. And by that, I mean their schedule is favorable and Auburn's is not favorable. I could very easily see Auburn losing all 4 of their away games, including 2 Ole Miss, just because Auburn's secondary, and I talked about this with Chad. We didn't talk about necessarily the 3 of us, but Auburn's secondary is kind of their weakest point on defense for sure. And we all know that Ole Miss has, the best wide receiver core in the conference. But along with that, anytime that Gus Malzahn has had a successful season at Auburn, whether he was the head coach or the offensive coordinator, immediately after their really good seasons, they have an 8-5 year. Mm-hmm. It's happened both times so far. They instantly have an 8-5 year. Obviously, they return a little bit more. I mean, they've got Stidham. It looks like he's a better returning quarterback than I already forgot the quarterback's name from a couple of years back. But anyway, but that's a rough thing to have to go through, to have to go to Starkville, to Oxford, to Tuscaloosa, to Athens. And I think that is just enough that Auburn can't land that number 2 spot this year, and Mississippi State takes advantage. Really, that's ultimately it with those 2. I just think that it's a scheduling thing. Mississippi State has a tough, again, they have to go to LSU, which you never know what's going to happen in that, that matchup on the road. They have to go, of course, to Tuscaloosa, so that's most likely a loss. They have to go to Oxford this year, and you never know what happens in the Egg Bowl. And they have to go to Kentucky, which is just a long way to travel for a team from Starkville, Mississippi.
Yeah, it's basically Canada.
Basically.
More or less, yeah.
But outside of that, I mean, Florida is in Starkville, Auburn's in Starkville, Texas A&M's in Starkville, and it's a little bit more favorable, and I think that they can take advantage of that. Wouldn't surprise me at all if they don't, because it's a new head coach, new system. But anyway, so behind that is A&M and Ole Miss in the 4th and 5th spots. Those are two teams. I think that the transition under Jimbo Fisher is going to be shakier this year than maybe y'all are. But I just don't think that the quarterback situation is favorable right now, with them not really knowing exactly who they're going to go with. And so I honestly feel like A&M and Ole Miss could flip-flop in the 4th and 5th, just kind of depending on a few factors here. But then I've got LSU and Arkansas rounding things out in the last 2 spots. Once again, I want to emphasize, I don't think LSU will be terrible by this time next year, but that schedule is the worst thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. Okay, that's an exaggeration, but
I think they'll have a new coach by this time next year, and we'll be looking better.
Yeah, and that's again where I disagree with you. Well, I mean,
I
don't think that they should. They might.
Oh, they should. Yeah, they should. They shouldn't have hired the guy in the first place. But
and that's where I disagree with you vehemently.
No, I think you raise a really good point about Auburn and Auburn. I mean, Auburn's road games are tough, and I think that it's kind of the same. It's the same deal, honestly, with Alabama. And I don't want this to come across as trying to sound like I'm an Ole Miss homer, that I'm predicting Ole Miss to win.
You don't have to try to sound that way. It's all good.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to predict Ole Miss is going to beat Alabama or beat Auburn. But you do get 2 teams in Alabama and Auburn that are breaking in new secondaries going to Oxford early in the year. So Auburn, I think Auburn may be a little later in the year, but that's still I think that's a really interesting matchup. I think ultimately Auburn and Alabama win both of those games, relatively easily, like they did last year. But I think it's enough to be kind of like, because you kind of wonder, like, with Ole Miss and the running game, is it possible if they can get a little bit more on the ground? Could that really be a threat? I don't think so, but I think you raise a really good point when you say that. So I can see that happening.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Dear listener, please tell us your thoughts. I do want to remind everyone who is listening to this that if you go to our website, rotc.podbean.com, you can comment directly on posts. We will put up a written format of our predictions here that you can comment on. Every week, we'll post a new screenshot of the spreadsheets that I'm keeping up with that have all of our predictions, all of our week-to-week predictions, how we're doing in terms of, what we've predicted correctly and incorrectly. And I'm going to put those up there. That's going to be written content on the website.
And the winner gets to be commissioner of the SEC.
Yeah, which is, I don't want it. I don't want that job. Good Lord.
I do. It's fine.
Yeah. I don't know. I'll think about it. But
I mean, I'd make good money, but I wouldn't be corrupt enough to be able to handle that.
Well, but if you're corrupt enough, you make more money.
Right. And that's you just kind of said exactly what I said.
That's exactly what I meant.
I think we're now completely off the rails.
Oh, I love it. All right, this has been Running Out the Clock. Thanks, Chandler. Thanks, Keith, for joining me here. No thanks to Roe. He's the worst. We all hate him.
Just the worst.
Let us know. Tweet at us at ROTC Sports. Go to our website. Comment on the posts. Let us know, if you're listening, what your predictions are, where you think we're complete idiots, because we know we are. I mean, there's no surprises there. But let us know where you disagree or where you agree. And we will catch you next time, which next episode, I remind you, will be an actual, talking about the season episode, which is so exciting.
And talking about the Knowles.
Always. Always. Thanks for joining us here on Running Out the Clock, the world's foremost authority on SEC viewers talking about the Knowles. And I got to come up with a better way to say that. I'm sorry. I ruined it.